front. First up, though, let's talk about a variety of stories in the news related to, extremism of one kind or another. Let's talk to Dr. Alan Mendoza. He's Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I do want to talk to you about this Cineworld issue with this film about the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, because I do think this is a very, very, very serious issue in this country. But first of all, I want to talk about the other side of extremism. We're often told by many that this is the one we should really be worried about, and this is far-right extremism. Yesterday, Alex Davies, a Nazi sympathiser and co-founder of a far-right group called National Action, was jailed for 8.5 years after he'd been found guilty of being a member of the banned fascist group. The founder had apparently, this group, they'd infiltrated the police and the army. He was sentenced after found guilty of terrorism offences back on the 17th of May. Tell us a bit more about this man and why is the government so concerned, the country so concerned about National Action?
Well, National Action was the first far-right group to be banned in the UK since the Second World War. It was banned basically because it called for things like a race war. It celebrated the murder of Joe Cox. And Alex Davies, it turns out, was, of course, one of its co-founders. And in the course of the trial, he was described as possibly the biggest Nazi of the lot by the prosecution, which was clearly discovered when he was found guilty. So he's a deeply unpleasant person, given his views, given what he's been trying to do to foment race war, to kind of push this Nazi propaganda in the UK, and it's wonderful that he's been sort of convicted of this and won't be able to do it again. This is the important part here. It's about bringing these people into public scrutiny and making sure they face the full weight of the law should they be actually advocating views that are illegal or joining organisations that are illegal.
Interestingly, as a teenager, he had been referred twice to the government's Prevent scheme, so de-radicalisation scheme, by his own school when he was 15. Then he was also referred again when he was 19. He's founded National Action in 2013 while at university. They're said to have sort of paramilitary aspirations. They're focusing on martial arts, knife fighting, boxing. They've targeted female MPs. Some pretty questionable behaviours. They describe themselves as a white jihadist group, and a throwback to the 1930s dedicated to an all-out race war. I mean, this is really quite scary stuff, and this is what we're constantly told we're up against on the far right. But we know that in terms of the overall threat to us, it is radical Islamist extremism that is the big threat. But there's been a lot of focus on this far-right extremism. Is it growing? Is it a real threat to us? I mean, we know it was a threat to Joe Cox, a far-right sympathiser, murdered her in cold blood back in 2016. But is it a threat across the board even now?
It is a threat, and that is, of course, why certain groups like National Action were prescribed, because the threat was deemed to be growing. The threat has been growing. There have been increasing numbers of course, referrals to Prevent from the far right, and it's obvious that there is a strain of thought here that is proving attractive to a minority, obviously, but of people who need to obviously have it drummed out of them, and that's why those referrals are going up and why we are keen on seeing action against this hateful ideology. I mean, this is racism pure and simple. Yeah. It is, not in the British spirit. It is fundamentally un-British what they are attempting to do, just as their antecedents from Mosley and beyond were also anti-British in what they were trying to do. And so from this perspective, it is a dangerous ideology. It is something that led to, of course, mass murder and genocide when enacted in Nazi Germany. And this incredibly, and I do say it's incredibly because it's 2022, is what this man believes. Yeah, it is extraordinary. You can look back at, learning about the Nazis in your GCSEs and think, yeah, that seems like a good plan. I mean, it does. It kind of defies belief, doesn't it? I mean, the members, again, they are genuinely a threat to people. One member, Jack Renshaw, he was jailed for plotting to kill the MP Rosie Coop with a sword. Another was a serving soldier who was stockpiling weapons. Another joined the Metropolitan Police. Another constructed a pipe bomb, posted an image on social media, the Bradford skyline, threatening to eradicate Muslims from the town. Another was Alice Cutter, who entered a Miss Hitler beauty pageant. I mean, absolutely extraordinary. Let's talk about extremism on the other side. And I'm not talking about extremism as in terms of terrorism, but certainly extremist views that I would also say are
un-British. And that's these demonstrations and protests we've seen outside various different cinemas showing a new film. It's called The Lady of Heaven. I've got to be honest with you. I mean, I'm quite sure it's a film I'll never in my whole life ever feel the need to watch. But it's about Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, a British-made film by all accounts, very sensitively made. But it does feature a hologram feature of Prophet Muhammad. And of course, we know that in Islam, no images of Prophet Muhammad are considered to be acceptable. It is blasphemous. Now, we've seen these protests, Bradford, Blackburn, Birmingham and elsewhere. We've now seen Cineworld, the cinema chain that was showing this film. And again, it was largely being shown in Muslim communities, basically saying, we're not going to show the film anymore. Now, there have been some people protesting who've just making, peacefully protesting, but also people making threats, some very thinly veiled threats about action that would be taken. We spoke to Sajid Javid, the health secretary, earlier. He said he's worried about cancel culture. He said you don't have a right not to be offended. And he said we don't have blasphemy laws in this country. That is true in terms of the statute book, but de facto, we do have a blasphemy law, but it's only for one religion, isn't it?
Yes, you're quite right to point this out, Julia. The reality is that although there's nothing on the statute book, aggressive behaviour of the kind you've mentioned, extraordinary scenes outside cinemas, threats to staff, threats to others, has led to a film, by the way, which was, of course, produced by a Muslim director. Let's not forget that. And by the way, this issue is a lot about sectarianism within Islam, as opposed to necessarily being a Muslim.
This is seen as a Shia film as opposed to a Sunni film.
Correct. And this is also playing into this. We're now getting not only general blasphemy laws being, if you like, enacted on questions of Islam, but we're now even getting sectarian within Islam questions being brought to the fore where X and Y are saying this is acceptable, this is not. And it's basically seeing a 7th or 8th century theological discussion unfolding on Britain's streets, which is an extraordinary and terrifying prospect.
Listen, if a Muslim believes that it is a terrible blasphemy to have an image of the Prophet Muhammad, I'm perfectly happy to respect their right to hold that view and their right not to be forced to see that film. Absolutely. But no one's making them go and queue up and buy a ticket at a cinema and go in and see that film. The simple answer to this is don't go and see the film.
Exactly. There's an extraordinary sort of surrender by the power of the state, if you like, to, in normal behaviour. The reality is individuals have choices. They can choose not to go and see something. They can even choose to protest peacefully if they want outside something, if they really want to make a point about it. But the idea that a very, very small subsection, like obviously here's a small subsection of people who are protesting and making this, a very small subsection of people are saying that their sort of religious beliefs are universal in the sense that all of us should feel that we have to comply with them, is ludicrous and offensive, actually, again, to the idea of Britishness. It is as offensive as the far-right national action Nazism we were speaking about earlier. This is not Britain. Britain is a place of diversity and plurality. I don't think, we should go out needlessly offending people. But when a Muslim director puts out a film about a Muslim issue, it should not be the case that the film is pulled because of other arguments sectarian arguments within a community. This is Britain in 2022, and we should not be subjected to blasphemy policy.
Amen to that. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Dr. Alan Mendoza. Very much appreciate that. Coming up.